Newcastle United have been beaten 2-0 at Arsenal. Myself, Alex Hurst, Charlotte Robson beside me, and remotely we have Norman Riley. Norman, you were at the match yesterday. How was it for you, mate?
Overall, in terms of the result, no, not overall. The result was very, very disappointing. Obviously, we lost, right? It's never pleasant. But I think a lot of positives to take, maybe not necessarily from the performance, but the day itself, in the sense that we, pre-match, were full of hope. We had hope that we might get something, and it felt like a kind of unique experience. It seems like it'd been a long time since we were going into a game of football with genuine optimism, because I thought Arsenal were there for the taking. Obviously, it transpired that they weren't, because you could argue that they comfortably beat us. I think the deficiencies within the squad were kind of laid bare. Obviously, Howe sets up the side to soak up the pressure and potentially hit them on the break. And I thought we did soak up that pressure really well in the first half. You could argue that they didn't necessarily create anything clear-cut. You had the Aubameyang chance, open goal more or less, that he missed. But that was kind of the only chance that they fashioned from open play. The free kick from Ødegaard was very well struck. Great save from Dubravka. It was fantastic to have Dubravka back. And maybe you could say that the reason they didn't create as many clear-cut chances is because Dubravka commands his area, right? He doesn't stay on his line, so a lot of the balls he was coming out and claiming. But I got to half-time and I thought we could get something. But when your plan is to catch a team on the counter, to soak up pressure and catch them on the counter, you have to be able to counter-attack. And unfortunately, yesterday, we didn't really offer anything going forward. And that was the big issue. You know, we were defensively poor in the second half, but ultimately we still kept it at 0-0, and we really struggled to kind of get the ball out of our half, and that was an issue. And I think we need it kind of indicated how much we really need that kind of midfielder who can transition the play from our end to their end really quickly. And Shelvey's good at spraying passes around, but I'm talking about a midfielder who can kind of do the hard yards in terms of running. I think we missed that yesterday, so I overall disappointed with the result. I did see some positive signs, but also everything that we've been saying about this squad for the last couple of years, I think we saw evidence of that yesterday quite clearly.
Very interesting, mate. How about since you were in the away end, how about the reaction at the end of the game? You know, social media, whilst not always being incredibly accurate, it's snowing very heavily in Newcastle.
It's really snowing.
Wow. Not that matters to anyone listening, probably.
I can see it from here.
You know, there was a lot of consternation. We might talk about that kind of expectation a little bit later of where the fans are at the minute and why. But how, were the fans with the team, was there frustration, or was there a little bit more realism that actually, my take on this, mate, is I didn't expect us to get anything yesterday. I'd have loved us to, and you could argue that we have to because of the position we're in, because Leeds are picking up points, because Norwich are picking up points. But ultimately, we've gone to a team that were unbeaten in 10 before they played possibly the best team in the country last week, who are very, very good side and going places. Was there that togetherness still by the end of the game?
I thought there was. I thought the atmosphere throughout from the Newcastle fans was excellent, barring a very, very, very tiny handful of fans kind of dotted sporadically throughout the away end, singing attack, attack, attack at one stage. But I don't recall any situations where the frustration towards the players was palpable. I don't recall any kind of criticisms or real audible groans. So to me, I think you mentioned you didn't expect anything. That's the difference between hope and expectation, right? Expectation is thinking we'll go in there, we'll get something. If we don't, it'll be a disappointment. The hope's completely different. Hope is, this is a really good side we're playing. All right, they lost heavily against Liverpool, but who doesn't lose heavily against Liverpool ultimately? We might get something. That's all it was. It was always a might get something. It was never an expected, we should definitely get something, yeah. And we lost 2-0 against a team that's got a really good home record this season, and ultimately only seems to lose against your kind of top tier teams. All right, Brentford in the first day of the season, but it's a freshly promoted club. There's always that kind of impetus, right? Apart from that game against Brentford, they've won all the games they probably expected to win, and yesterday was no different. So no, I don't think there was any negativity coming from the end. In fact, at the end of the match, how when the players came over, in the dynamic between the fans and those players and how was excellent. Willock threw his shirt into the end. I give it to a fan. Shea did the same thing. There was applause. There was singing. The singing, as I say, throughout was really positive. And what I'd like to see is obviously against Norwich on Tuesday, which is seismic game, a continuation of that atmosphere, because it was. I don't recall any periods where there wasn't a song going on, at least in parts of the away end. And put it this way, it's the first time I've came back from a match in a long time where I've had a sore throat from singing, as opposed to just shouting my frustrations out at the players on the pitch.
That's nice. I think that's corroborated as well by our Matchday podcast, which is on Patreon, because I edited that for Norman last night, and it really was. It was like singing all the way through. There was a patch of we're rich and we're shit, but I mean, it still feels, even though I was just listening to the audio, it still feels like it's in good faith. It still feels like we're behind. Like, it's like, oh well, we're still here and we still love this team, and like it's gonna get better. Like, I don't know. I didn't feel any negativity. That's
why I wanted to speak to Norm about his experience in the end, isn't it? Because I watched the game. I was actually at Liverpool v Southampton for reasons I'm not going to. And you look at social media, and the NUFC 360 account, which is a very good account, is tweeting, "We need to start mentally preparing for relegation." Didn't feel like that from what Norman's just said. I don't think that's fair, mate. That there's still that resilience from the people that were there.
I would agree with that. I think, can I just point out on Charlotte's comment as well on the, we're rich and we're effing shit. That's what that was. The Newcastle fans singing that was actually a reaction to the Arsenal fans singing it.
Yeah. I heard the Arsenal fans.
I don't think it was like, we're basically shouting at the players on the pitch, telling them how bad they are, right? It was more kind of the Arsenal fans were saying, "You're rich and you're fucking shit," and then we piped up with "We're rich and we're fucking shit." It was just a reaction to that. So I think, look, as I say, the only air quotes negative that I recall was the attack, which that you could argue that's a negative, right? But as I say, it was a handful of fans. It really was. But I still think that the Howe coming in has given us such a lift as a fan base that I think this kind of positive attitude will carry over. I didn't see anything yesterday, as you see, Alex, expectations. I didn't see anything yesterday during that performance that made me think we're worse than we are. If you see what I mean? I didn't necessarily see anything that made me think we're better than we are, but it's a well, what did we learn from yesterday that were actually an absolutely terrible side? Not really. It was Arsenal way, and Arsenal, for all of their faults, they've got a good team, and some of their players are absolutely brilliant. And like, they are streets ahead of, in terms of natural ability, they've got players who are streets ahead of us. So 2-0 away, where we played all right against them for periods, it probably meets realistic expectations, unfortunately.
And are you still positive about the chances of staying up, mate, after yesterday?
Whoa, that's a question, isn't it? Right. I'll have to. It's difficult to give an answer one way or the other, right? Because ultimately, what you've got to look at is the amount of games remaining, right? And this is 13 games in now, over a third of the season without a win. So, and statistically, you've had Derby County do it, and then Sheffield United 1991. Thank you to Mark Corby for that reminder this morning. Football did exist prior to the Premier League, so it's doable, right? But my God, it's going to take a gargantuan effort. I think we're kind of fortunate in that the gap isn't that big. I think maybe TF put a tweet out yesterday with the fact that the gap between us and like 10th is only something ridiculous, like 7 points. So it's not huge, right? Maybe not 10th, maybe it's 12th. Maybe I'm getting too excited and thinking we're getting to the Europa Conference.
6 points off 17.
So it's 7 points up to fourth, then, right? 7 points up to fourth. It's a tight league this year. I mustn't be looking at the top 10 of the table. I think I've stopped doing that about 3 years ago.
I'm the same. I don't know who's in there.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even know the names of the teams.
How are Reading getting on these days?
Yeah. How's Royal Engineers getting on with the top 4? It's a gargantuan task, right? I mean, ultimately, we're next 8 games. Norwich and Burnley will come out of those with 6 points on the board. I would say, put it this way, we come out of Norwich and Burnley with 2 wins. Can we avoid relegation? My answer will be yes. We come out of those 2 games with anything less than 6 points, I'd be wobbling. I think I'd be telling a bit of a lie if I thought we were in a good position to avoid relegation. Ultimately, out of the bottom 5 sides now, you have to say, right now at this moment in time, right, we are favourites to be in that bottom 3. That you can't. You're being unrealistic if you disagree with that. But I do believe that with a couple of the right players coming in, with Howe being, 2 or 3 weeks down the line, his methods on the training ground kind of being instilled a bit more, and with a couple of victories in the bag to build up confidence, then yes, we can avoid relegation. You have to think we can avoid relegation, and I really do. But at the same time, we were talking about this yesterday in the pub after the match. We're talking to a couple of Arsenal fans, and they're like, if you get relegated, how do you think that'll pan out? And I said, well, we'll come straight back up. We'll win 46 games. So you know what? If we get relegated, hey, it doesn't matter. We'll have a great year next year.
Okay, part 2 of the show. Norman and Charlotte, I would like to really question the team selection yesterday. I'm delighted Howe is the manager. I think he's going to do a great job, and I think he's going to keep us up. More on that later when we come to part 3 of the show. We'll talk about the massive week that we'll have ahead. I think, and I said this after Brentford, very hard to win a game in the Premier League when you goalkeeper players like Carl Darlow played, and I believe that was a really bad call, selecting him ahead of Dubravka for that fixture. These are big decisions, and it's kind of unfortunate for Howe and his coaching team that selection, in my opinion, cost us 3 points in that fixture. The fact that he picked Dubravka this week suggests that was a wrong call, not just because of what happened in terms of the 3 goals we conceded, but I think, like Norman mentioned before, Dubravka is just a better goalkeeper than Carl Darlow in almost every department. Yesterday, selecting in a back 4, Matt Ritchie and Emil Kraft as your fullbacks. I'm going to say it again, very hard to win games in the Premier League if 2 of your back 4 are Emil Kraft, who has never been good enough for the Premier League, in my opinion. I don't think he's ever had a good game for Newcastle, certainly at right back. And then Matt Ritchie, I feel that's a really, really bad selection. Now, of course, both of the goals, you look at both fullbacks, particularly the first goal. I mean, the second goal was horrific from Ritchie. He neither presses the man to stop the cross, nor does he follow the runner. That's a really bad goal to concede. The first goal from Kraft, he just completely loses Saka. He's wrong side of him. I mean, really, in hindsight, all Kraft has to do is nudge him off the ball wrong side, because not a pen, as we learned 30 seconds earlier at the other end before the second goal. More on that later. I'm really surprised, both of you, and keen on thoughts from either of you, that he went for a back 4 yesterday. I was really surprised against Brentford that he went for a back 5/back 3. However, what we saw on the pitch, better performances from ASM and Joe Linton in particular out wide, better performance than John Joe Shelvey, that I think he got that selection right, and he ended up finishing the game with a back 4 against Brentford, but that's okay because we're going for a win. I think he got those calls right there, even though I'd have said pre-game they're the wrong calls. I thought starting yesterday with a back 4 and a central midfield 2 of Shelvey and Joe Willock was a very, very bold selection. Joe Willock, I think he's kind of picked up some criticism again. I think he worked really hard, particularly to support Matt Ritchie in the left back position, and he put a lot of graft in, and fair play to him for that. I thought Isaac Hayden has to be the man selected. And my frustration, in particular, is Joe Linton, and we talked about Joe Linton a lot, has a fantastic game against Brentford, and again, he's been criticised for not following it up yesterday. Every single time Joe Linton's had a good game for Newcastle, the next fixture, he's been moved. Yeah. And he was more central yesterday. He was behind Callum Wilson. There were moments when he drifted that wide. I just think Howe got it wrong, Charlotte.
I agree with you. And I really don't want to say it because we're only his second game, right? And I really want to get behind him, and I am behind him. But yesterday, I was shocked to see Kraft in the team. I was shocked to see Ritchie, as you say, in that position. And then to move things around, ASM also wasn't in. If you think about where he was in Brentford and the mobility that he had across the pitch, he just wasn't allowed that yesterday because of the way we set up. And the same for Joe Linton. You said yourself there that he drifted out wide a little bit. That's because he wants to, because he's better out there. He can actually influence play out there. I do find it interesting that there's such a difference. And I said this to you yesterday, in his games, like if he's even like a few yards more central, his game completely changes. He loses confidence. He doesn't know how to move. He just can't play in that position. And okay, maybe it was an experiment from Eddie Howe to see what we're working with here. But that's what training's for to me. And like, I don't know. I agree. I think he got it wrong. And I do kind of understand that kind of back 4 wanting not to let their like Saka get in. Obviously he did, because we don't have the players that can contain him. Kraft being a prime example. Ritchie, yeah, Kraft and Ritchie being the prime example. I get like why you would want to, but we don't have the personnel to like do that. So it was.
This is the thing, isn't it? And I know Norman, you want to come in. do we not have the personnel? Because I'd suggest if you're going to play a flat back four, that you have two full-backs that would perform, maybe not up to the level required to win the game or change the result even, but having watched Javier Manquillo play a lot for Newcastle, having watched Emil Kraft play a lot for Newcastle, I know who I'm selecting, and it ain't the Swede. Haven't seen Matt Ritchie play left back a couple of times in flat back four, something I never wanted to see again. And in fact, there's some images on social media showing Ritchie's position for the second Arsenal goal. Like, Newcastle's defensive line is a diagonal line, which is quite extreme. It's like that that's really bad. We can't get away from the fact that that's lack of organisation, lack of application, discipline, and just lack of ability. So it does come down to team selection a little bit. And listen, it's easy for us to say hindsight's a beautiful thing. Newcastle may have lost more heavily, or the result may not have changed with those two fullbacks playing yesterday. But I have to say, I think changing week to week formation wise, and this maybe this is how playing the back four. We're back four now. We might never see the back three again, and that would make sense. So if and this is what you didn't get under Bruce. You got the constant changes because things went so badly. Something had to change. If we are now a team that is going to play a back four, and even if that is going to be the back four, I understand. It would make more sense like we've done yesterday. We can't answer those questions until we play the games coming up.
Yeah. I guess, and I know no one wants to come in, I guess what I liked, and when the team selection came out, I was like, Kraft, like, I don't want to see him on the pitch. But I, like I say, can kind of see why we're lining up like that, even if I don't think that the personnel is the correct choice. And what I like about that is that I feel at the moment that we've got a manager or a head coach who's looking at our opposition and specifically tailoring what we're doing to the opposition. It didn't work. It didn't work. But I don't know if I'm clutching at straws or trying to see what's not there, but that I felt encouraged by.
Norman?
I don't have any issue with the formation. That's Premier League football, where you're in a team that's struggling and you're going away to a so-called bigger side, and you're probably picking a formation, thinking of how they're going to attack you. So I kind of understand the back four, especially how you play wing backs against Arsenal, right? And the fact is that their two full backs, Tavares and Tomiyasu, were absolutely brilliant players, right? I mean, the kid Tomiyasu was just like, watching him in the flesh was just like one of those, wow, this lad knows how to play. And then you've obviously got Saka as well, right? And Aubameyang stretches. He had a poor game in terms of his finishing yesterday, but he still stretches the line. So you think a flat back four, it won't allow them the opportunity to get in behind as much as it might with two wing backs in, right? So I can get it. However, yes, for me, it was a case of the personnel. I would have preferred to have seen Manquillo in it right back to Kraft, because I think Kraft is absolutely atrocious. Ritchie, he's coming into this club. We're in a relegation battle. He's had Ritchie for years as a player. He doesn't really know much about Jamal Lewis other than, I guess, the homework that he's done on him. Lewis didn't really play under Bruce. You have to think, well, how match fit is he? Ultimately, he hasn't had 90 minutes under his belt. It's not like he can play reserve games as well to keep his match fitness up. So I can understand it. However, I do think that Matt Ritchie being suspended for the next game is almost an ideal opportunity for Jamal Lewis to come in and stake his claim. You could even argue if Paul Dummett was fit, he would be left back right. What I suppose worried me more than anything else yesterday was when I looked at the lineup and I looked at the formation and I saw the centre midfield, and I thought that Arsenal midfield, Partey, the other lad, is it Simbi? I think he's called. That's kind of, maybe his name, I might be incorrect there, but I just thought they're gonna dominate, and Smith Rowe as well, and not having a defensive midfielder, but also having Fabian Schär as one of your centre halves, who is a kind of a more, I'll say, attacking centre half, right? He likes to bring the ball out, right? So there's always a risk with a defender doing that when you haven't got a defensive midfielder in front of him, and that for me was the error, I would say, and ultimately Partey, especially, just absolutely dominated that space in the middle of the park. So that's where I think we fell down. Was I understand the formation, but I think he got the personnel perhaps wrong.
Yeah, fair enough, and it's a learning process. I wonder if the long hand of Graham Jones had something to do with that.
What a creepy image.
Because I think Jones rates Kraft. Before Jones came in last January, Kraft was nowhere. He was absolutely nowhere near this starting 11. Jones has, I think, been a big advocate of Kraft, and it just didn't work. And when you concede 2 goals like we did. We're very vulnerable through the middle of the pitch for the reasons that you say, Norman, and I agree with you. And I think Isaac Hayden, for particularly that fixture, has to start. Then against Norwich, I don't mind if Shelvey and Willock's going to be his 2. You know, you hopefully against a team like Norwich, that's going to be beneficial in terms of scoring goals. But I think Isaac Hayden has to start yesterday. Myself, hindsight's a wonderful thing. We'll move on, Charlotte.
No, I was just going to say that's a very good point, because do you remember Jones's first game in charge and Kraft started and everyone was like, no, maybe he's been the one behind all this whole time. I do believe that. Yeah. And I know, but I just, all right. I've only had one coffee today.
Just reiterating.
I'm bolstering your point.
Thank you for the support. We're both right, ultimately.
It is so cold in here, I can see my breath.
Yeah. Become a patron to heat the True Faith office in Collingwood Street in Newcastle. I think that's about it, for part 2. I think there were some mistakes there in team selection. Ultimately, we might have lost the game anyway. There's, Charlotte, just to ask you actually in this final part for this part of the show, you thought that Howe looked close to tears yesterday.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if he just has sort of watery eyes naturally, because some people do.
It was cold.
It was cold. It was cold down in London. It's cold up in Newcastle. I watched his sort of comments after, he's not as noteworthy as our previous manager, so it's nothing that will shock anybody, but he did look a bit sad, and he was asked about the sort of you're rich and you're shit things, and he said, I don't believe that's correct. I've been in the back room. I know these players, and I know we've got some talent here, kind of thing. But he did look really, really sad, and I suppose you would be. We're going into a very tough time now, so it's going to be hard work. The pressure's on. So maybe my eyes would be watery as well.
Norman,
I would think the fact that he's had COVID, he's probably just knackered, right? I mean, can you imagine the emotional 3 weeks that he's had? The amount of work that he's had to put on the training ground, then he got COVID. He's probably just absolutely, at the end of that game, all the kind of adrenaline inside of him building up to this game, the game itself where, your energy must just be getting sapped out of you. At the end of it, he's probably just exhausted. I'm sure that he's gone home post-match. He's ran himself a lovely bath, got some candles, and he's had his little computer screen in front of him doing his analysis from the bath, and he's feeling fully refreshed. We're going to take Norwich a new one on Tuesday.
I can imagine that analysis just being on their fancy computer screens, drawing a box around Matt Ritchie for the second goal and just putting a question mark next to it. Remind myself to ask Matt what the fuck he's doing here.
It's like the analysis on, was it Match of the Day, where they just drew an arrow to the goal? Score a goal.
A quick point, actually, on selection and formation. I think what I did recall during the game, I recall thinking was, if we're having someone in behind the centre forward, it probably should have been Miggy Almiron, because he could stretch them. And I know, like you say, mate, Joe Linton had a great game against Brentford, and unfortunately, rather than being played in the position where he's had an excellent game, he's been shifted again. So it almost makes me think, well, actually, if you're going to change a formation, if the kid's played really well in his position, you don't need to keep him in the team just because he had a good game. If you're changing formation, it's almost like take him out of the team, put in the player who can play in that position, i.e. Miggy Almiron. Joe Linton's still got his confidence. He doesn't have a game where he's not involved at all, and maybe loses that kind of buzz that he had after Brentford. So maybe that was something that he possibly could have done, was have chosen Almiron instead of Joe Linton in that particular formation.
I think you're right, and I would have gone with that, but I promise you, gobshites like me would be sat here saying, why the hell hasn't he started Joe Linton after the game he had last week? So he's kind of damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. But this brings it back to the formation point. What are we going to play against Norwich? Because Joe Linton, if we're going to play 4-4-2 or 4-4-1-1 against Norwich, there is no role for Joe Linton there, in my opinion, and ASM is weakened because of it. So even though I've been the biggest advocate against 5 at the back under Bruce, what we saw against Brentford in what was really a 3-4-3 formation was Joe Linton and ASM played in positions that suited them best. So it's a real tough one. We'll of course have a full Norwich preview. Charlotte, it's a big old week, is it not? Can you talk the listener and I and Norman through your thoughts ahead of this one?
Yeah, I feel like the last 2 weeks have been big old weeks, but it really is a big old week.
Big week, isn't it?
It's double big, super double big week. Yeah, my thoughts are that we absolutely have to beat both Norwich and Burnley. Like we absolutely have to beat them. There are sort of murmurings of maybe if we get 4 from these 2 fixtures, that might be okay. It won't be okay. Like in my opinion, we have to get 6 because you know, I don't know if it was you I was talking to, or maybe my dad yesterday. Norwich is actually a 6-pointer. Like Burnley could be, and I just think that they're just. I don't know how to overstate how important these matches are. Like, if we don't beat them, I don't fancy our chances for the rest of the season at all. And not just don't beat them, like I don't even think we can draw. And so getting the team selection is absolutely vital. Getting it right, by the way, not just getting it. It's vital. We need to get behind them, which we are. We're going to go on Tuesday night. I'm sure that, you know, every Newcastle fan in St James's Park on Tuesday night knows how big this is and is going to be behind the team 100%. And then going into Burnley as well. If we win on Tuesday, I think that momentum will be absolutely brilliant. We've broken that kind of, because there will be a sort of psychological sort of thing going on. We've not won a game yet. Like, you know, like that Almiron thing. Do you remember how many games it took him to score? It became this shadow kind of thing. And I'm sure that the players can feel that too. So if we win on Tuesday, I've got really high hopes for Saturday, and if we don't, I haven't really considered that. I think we're going to, but I think we have to.
Norman?
Absolutely huge. The absolute epitome of 6-pointers, both games. Bigger than Jesus. These games are bigger than Jesus Christ. Bigger than organised religion. Mega structures is what they are, these games. Mega structures. Look, Norwich are a totally different proposition. I think under Dean Smith, I thought against Wolves yesterday, they were really unlucky not to win. They've got a little bit of a bounce. They've got a bit of confidence. They've got I think 3 draws, 2 wins, and 1 defeat in the last 6 games. I mean, you know, that's decent form, right? So our expectation is we're going to win. This is the hope versus expectation, right? I think we expect to win this game, and we ultimately have to, as Charlotte says. If we don't beat Norwich, then that albatross around my neck, as they say, it gets even heavier for the game against Burnley. The amount of pressure on the Burnley game if we don't beat Norwich is going to be huge. And I do think that regardless of how up for the game we might be on Saturday, as a fan base, we're going to be collectively nervous, right? So not beating Norwich, those nerves will carry over into Burnley, and I think we'll maybe be on edge for the first few minutes in anyways. And that can sometimes filter down to the pitch. So for me, beating Norwich is huge. We beat Norwich, the atmosphere goes through the roof. Going into Burnley, it'll be massive. So I can't. There aren't any other words, mate. There are genuine other words. These games are hugely important. If we come out of these games with anything less than 4 points, but even then, it's going to be tough. I think anything less than 6 points, then I'm going to be deeply concerned. That might sound really negative, but as I say, you've just got to look at the table and look at how many games have been played. It's not being, negative or being like downbeat. It's just looking at the table and saying, well, we've played 15 games and we're on 8 points or 10 points and we're in the bottom 3. It's hard, isn't it? Statistically, it's going to be tough.
I don't think it's negative. I just think it's realistic. Like you have to, you can have as much hope as you like that something mental's going to happen in from December onwards and we're going to win every single game that we play. But yeah, you have to be realistic about it as well. And as you say, Norman, if we don't win those games, the realistic thing is that we're probably going to go down.
And I suppose you've just put it in really good terms, Norman. Even if we win both games, it will put us on 12 points from 15. That is still a catastrophic position to be in. And that's if you win both games. And we will preview both games in their own right on Patreon. But I agree. And I'll be throwing no towels in because what's the point? And I think the fan base should do the same. I think Eddie Howe deserves better than that, and new owners deserve better than that. If we don't win both of these games, it's probably more likely, and I haven't looked at betting odds or anything like that we fail to win both games than we win both games at the minute, because as Norman correctly says, Norwich are in decent form. Burnley are in decent form. Burnley play today, after we record this. It's a hard game against Spurs at their place, but if Burnley would have beat Spurs, I got a point there. I don't think anyone would be overly, shocked by that. what I'll find very interesting is, the approach against Brentford was press them, get the ball back, get the ball forward. We have to do those things. We have to see those things. Even though Norwich are in nearly as bad a position as we are, they have the same issues that we do in terms of being cut adrift. Their goal difference is, I think we have the worst goal difference now, actually.
We have -14, I think, yesterday.
Yeah, maybe Norwich have the worst. But either way,
I'll double check.
Norwich, a point for Norwich is fine. Norwich will be targeting this game as a must-win. If they have realistic aspirations of staying up, they need to win this game. If they come here and get a point, there'll be positives to take for Norwich. It's another game unbeaten. Newcastle haven't won. But this is 19th versus 20th. This is not 18th and 17th. So Norwich need to win this game. Burnley, because they're a little bit further on. Burnley, because they obviously play twice before we play Burnley. I think a draw for Burnley is more acceptable in that position, and that will present its own challenges for us. However, so when people talk about 2 wins and is 4 points enough, we'll have to beat Norwich. All right, I imagine Eddie Howe and the coaching staff and the players will look at this week as not, we've got to win both games. We have to beat Norwich. We can worry about Burnley after Burnley. We have to beat Norwich. If we can't beat Norwich, Brentford, Leeds at home in the Premier League, we are not going to stay up. It's as simple as that. And Norwich have tightened up defensively, so they aren't the porous team they were under Farke. And it's not going to be as easy as it was. And I thought Farke was incredibly hard done by. But then I have to say, would I rather Daniel Farke was in charge for this one of Norwich? Yes, I would, in terms of Newcastle winning. So we have got to beat Norwich. That's the message now. I agree with everything you say, Charlotte, about the fan base. If we're playing shite after 36 minutes, if we're 1-0 down at half time, if it's 2-0 to them on 65 minutes, as a support, we cannot grumble, we cannot moan. We had 14 years of being shite and letting the team and the management and the ownership know about it. Let's try something different now, because this game is a must-win game. I think a draw against Norwich, a win against Norwich and a draw against Burnley is really bad, but I still think we could stay up. I honestly do. But if we don't beat Norwich, I'm not throwing in the towel, but it's like, who you're going to beat. It's who you're going to beat.
They do have the worst goal difference. They're -20.
Take that, Norwich, Delia, the rest of them.
Cook your way out of that one.
Yeah. I think that just about does it this week. Norman wants to.
Sorry, I was going to say, I don't believe in fate at all. I thought the whole concept of it it's ridiculous. It's mere coincidence. But in this instance, I'm going to say I believe in fate 100%, because look at Steve McLaren, no wins. Who do we beat? Norwich, 6-2. Look at Rafa in the Championship. If we lost that game against Norwich, we're out of the playoffs. The negativity would have been huge. We'll come back and beat them 4-3. We are fated to beat this Norwich side. And what I will say is Smith has come in, and no doubt he's improved them, and he will improve them. But defensively, Aston Villa lost John Terry as a defensive coach this season, and they were shocking defensively. Smith cannot coach sides particularly well defensively, and Norwich are so bad at the back that if we play like we did against Brentford in terms of how we press, I'm very confident that we'll score and we'll win the game, no doubt. And in terms of Farke, well, interestingly enough, listeners, I'm speaking to a Norwich fan this afternoon on the day this has been recorded, Sunday, and I'm very much looking forward to getting his opinion on the sacking of Farke and whether or not he feels it was fair, because as you say, he seemed to have done a good job, but ultimately, like you, I agree, I'd rather he was in charge of them for this particular game. But you know what? I am confident that we'll beat them. So despite the intense pressure on the game, and as you see, it is a game that we need to win, I'm genuinely confident we'll do it.
There we go. On that positive note, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for listening. We are on Patreon, of course, £5.50 a month. If you like this podcast and want to keep it going, we'd love to have you on board. I think I will be back. I'm not sure with who very late on Tuesday night after our 5-0 victory over Norwich. And of course, we'll be back after the Burnley game Sunday for that one. So thanks for listening. Speak to you all very soon. Bye-bye.